Okay, hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. Hopefully my voice is loud and clear and the background music isn't too loud. If there's any thing that the listeners feel is off about the audio of the lecture, please let me know. In today's episode, I wanted to speak about an idea that is very important in intellectual circles, but it is also important to know as a philosopher in this world. You see, the world is designed in many ways. There's many types of human beings on this planet, and these human beings generate perception as they engage the world they're in. We do not only feel judged by the eyes of others, we are also the judging the eyes of others. And so the title for today's episode is Metaethics and Philosophical Whispers in the Void, and I would like to speak about Hume's Guillotine. Now I just have to fix this title, just a second folks, okay. So not only am I going to read some things for you in this episode that are important to know, but I wanted to tell you that the major difference when it comes to knowledge and the filtration of knowledge, that means how we as human beings comprehend the world around us. I would say in the modern time, we speak about it as through what are the terms? Normative and positive statements. In metaethics, and the word meta means after. Metaethics, not physics. In metaethics, we have moral realism and anti-realism, these two ideas. Ethics is considered about not only the actual result of the behavior of 8 billion creatures implemented in a multidimensional system, but ethics has to do with also how our future looks at the world. And so when it comes to moral realism, this means that moral facts exist, and last night I was speaking about morality. It is in some sense the idea that morality is not abstract, and it is or something that is found in the outer realms, in the sense of an is and ought distinction. So I would explain it like this, that when we look at the world and we generate meaning, and then there's subjective meaning. When we wonder about what is real, the reality is independent by itself, or it is something we are imposing in the phenomena. We are projecting into the phenomena. That means the concept of ownership, it is in some sense, its realism is abstract. It is anti-realist in some sense. Because it is something that we are putting into the moment rather than being in the moment from itself, on its own. So Hume's Guillotine, Hume was this philosopher, and even though I shared this difference in metaethics, a sort of ethics that looks at what is real, and a sort of ethics that looks at what ought to be real, what should happen. That means our views on how the future should be in these talks. When I am talking about the future, that is in some sense notions beyond moral realism, because really in life, when it comes to speech and communication, it's context oriented. So when a person speaks, they're either speaking about the past, the present, or the future. We start from the present. Now, if I wanted to make conclusions, comments, and have perception on the future, because the future hasn't happened yet, it's a mentality of ought to be. And this is where I need to read something for you, for the listeners. This is from Hume, in A Treatise of Human Nature. So David Hume is an important figure to know in philosophy. He's a Scottish philosopher and historian. And this concept of Hume's law, Hume's guillotine, is just this major distinction between what is and what ought to be. So from A Treatise of Human Nature, written in 1739 by David Hume, I was just checking to see if it's on mute or not. This is what Hume says: "In every system of morality which I have hitherto met with, I have always remarked that the author proceeds for some time in the ordinary way of reasoning, and establishes the being of a god, or makes observations concerning human affairs, when of a sudden I am surprised to find that instead of the usual compulations or of propositions, is and is not, I meet with no proposition that is connected with an ought or ought not. This change is imperceptible, but is, however, of the last consequence. For as this ought or ought not expresses some new relation or affirmation, it's necessary that it should be observed and explained, and at the same time that a reason should be given for what seems altogether inconceivable. How this new relation can be a deduction from others which are entirely different from it. But as authors do not commonly use this precaution, I shall presume to recommend it to the readers, and am persuaded that this small attention would subvert all the vulgar systems of morality, and let us see that the distinction of vice and virtue is not founded merely on the relations of objects, nor is perceived by reason." You can say pretty much Hume's guillotine, Hume's law, David Hume, his thesis, how would I say it? He's pretty much saying, if you have access to sensory perception, you cannot find the logic in morality, which is an imposition. It is as if like our mind is a chemical, the world is a chemical, and what we perceive as life, it's like a chemical reaction between these two different types of chemicals. Now, if the mind moves the moment, obviously free will is inputting more movement in the moment. That means what we think as human beings, this is my personal view, what we think as human beings is free will, is actually acceleration in comparison to a conscious stable point. What that means is, sure, on one level we say a person is free, in the future we're going to have jetpacks, let's say, that are not heat based, so they don't burn our feet, but they're somehow sound based. So imagine in the future people will have jetpacks, and for the first time the species would realize what it's like being a bird. What I mean by that is that freedom is fast. Freedom is movement. Anything in any system that moves faster than all the other components in the system begins generating a new meaning in the system. And our free will is a retaliation, is a response to the forces of nature. and it is our success and achievement. Do you know the fact that we can, as human beings, speak? To me, this is one of the greatest human achievements. Even though I talk about language being a sort of blindfold and a simulation in modern times of what meaning is, but at the same time, I know that the road to getting here wasn't easy. And what this means is that by the nature of our design and the complexity our ancestors have gone through, whatever moment of selfishness we experience is equivalent to an ungratefulness of the long journey that it took to get here. You see, when you're a child in this world, your meaning is your immediate environment. But as the mind develops and the person trusts their sense of self in all the realms that they have existed in, something fascinating happens. Something happens that I would say a multidimensional upbringing takes place. So the child is living a life in accordance to immediate environment. The mind allows you to experience locations that are not local. That is the power of the mind. What that means is when a storyteller tells a story and everybody gets teleported in their imagination into that reality and actually experiences it or feels it, that is in some sense a suggestion that rather than you going to a location, the mind brought the location to itself. This is also similar to the antenna metaphor, where we don't have thoughts, we receive. We are simply, it's like, even though the brain is super complex and we're like, when we look at the brain, under the proper lenses, we notice that there is neural activity. What that means is right now, as I'm giving this talk, behind my eyes, inside my brain, the neural network, the behavior of them is in some sense like a thunderstorm. It's as if like the gods are fighting in the brain, and lightning is being seen in the clouds of the neurosphere. So I would say what it is that there's a ridiculous interdependency of phenomena. There is a ridiculous infinitude to phenomena, or magnitude. The size of this world is so big that whatever idea we have on it will be small. So this is why I say don't identify as a creature of language, because language cannot fulfill the promise it makes. Language is art. That means if it fulfills as much as an artwork does, And in this life, one of the most important things to realize about knowledge, which a lot of people don't understand this, and what it is that a lot of people are in the mindset of teacher-student. But I feel that is a flawed archetype. Let me tell you why. Because every person is multidimensional in their core. Every human being wakes up in the day to have an expression of communication. Why do we express communication? To animate the new self of the day. That means it's like being a person who's shy, and then you see the movie Castaway, and then you wonder why you haven't, a volleyball, you haven't looked at a volleyball like a human being. You know what I mean? It's so what it is, it's the sophistication of psychology, the self-expression that is permitted, and really, if in this life, the way the system works makes the person submissive to the system, or makes the person not dominant, but functionable, right? Because people think domination means you're taking everything all the time. What it means is, strangely, an openness due to a lack of fear at the scenario. And sometimes in life, intelligence or being smart has nothing to do with what you know from before. It has to do with who gets to this destination quickest. That is it. That means some things in life, if you realize they have a timeline, with a sort of time movement, what that means is you let's say there is like this, I don't know, I saw this video in China. This person threw a disc-like rock at the surface of this pond, and it went like 50 times or something. Like, it was ridiculous. But in that moment, it's as if the moment the person holds the rock and is about to throw it, in your mind the person goes, this guy's about to skip this rock on the lake or whatever, right? So your mind sees the future of the moment while being in the present, using the past. Do you understand? Like, our brains are using the past to react to the present, to respond to the present in a way where the future is safe. So really what we're doing at the end of the day, people can come and say I'm enlightened as much as they want, the future cannot be avoided as long as you are a manifest individual, right? So this is why I feel the New Age community, it has the greatest potential of inner advancement as a community, but it is bound by the language. Why? Because people in today's time are thrown in a situation where science is not fitting into their mind like a puzzle piece, religion is not fitting into their mind in a puzzle piece, and various ideological systems are just being seen to be emerging every day. Every day a person can have a new philosophy, so there's technically endless philosophies as long as human beings have an ability to communicate. But the notion, what I'm trying to get to is that after some point in this life, a question finds you that comes from within, right? These questions, I would say, are of a divine caliber. Like really, the outer realm will never understand us. I knew this from the beginning, from an early age. I knew that the reason I have to communicate, the reason we have to communicate, why, is to show our personality, but we are actually being something before we communicate. That means before I'm like right now, I'm giving this Mr.Within talk, but before I gave the talk, who was I? And if I was to answer that question, I was just the potential of sight, taking leaps in regards to the free will. That means a choice. That means our life is the shape of our choices, but hilariously, the choice is a shape, That means, why do we have dualism in the world? Because things are different. If everything was the same, there would be no individualism. This is why I'm saying that when I look at religious institutions or any ideological system in history and how it has moved so far, there is always the danger of ideas wanting to become dictators. So this is an ancient pattern. What I mean by that is, in everywhere in the world, when human beings began speaking, perspectives were being shared, and it was no longer survival of the fittest physical event. It was the survival of the most meaningful abstract event in the realm. So what I am saying is that we have moved into the era of minds in such a way where our survival no longer depends on just physical resources. That's preliminary. What our survival is based on now is to find the most world that we are living in and our species is living in, right? Because I'm telling you, after some point, time gets boring. That means people's minds will begin to notice patterns. There was, for me, one of the writers that inspired my own inner voice early on was Charles Bukowski. And this man had this incredible ability to poetically just slam Thor's hammer and say what was up in the society. Not avoiding cruelty because happiness has to be 24/7. I think it was Bob Ross who, he said something incredible. He was drawing this painting and he's like, in life, everything comes in opposites, and you need the light to know the dark. You need the dark to know the light. What that means is all the evil people on the planet actually need to believe in goodness to deviate from that goodness to be considered evil. Right? And all the good people have to believe in evil in order to, in some sense, have a reference for good. It's hilarious. It's a game of dualism. That means the wheel of karma for the mind is duality. And if you were a religious person listening to me, I would say duality is the devil. That means don't freak out. This universe is strangely designed that our sensory perception generates the attraction towards its whatever content it is. Do you know? There's this story which finds us from the Islamic part of the world. And it's not a religious story, but it's a story of something that happened in an Islamic town back in the day, you know. And so what the story is that, so for people who don't know, on this planet, we have ideological systems that are monotheistic. What does that mean? That means people of religion, they look at life and they don't see a physical world. They see God being everything and moving everything as everything all the time, right? This is why telling a religious person not to have faith is like telling him not to trust the context of the universe you have accepted, right? This is something that in modern atheism, in militant atheism, did not understand. So it bulldozed through, but it didn't realize that you cannot step on gum and not have the gum attached to your feet. And what I mean by that is that anything a person fights, they become. So the atheistic movement, modern atheistic movement that happened maybe like 10 years ago, was booming 10 years ago. Right now it's 2020. It started and kind of went up, I would say, to 2000, maybe 18. It was very profound and popular. Now we're going towards a philosopher approach. What it is that militant atheism came to eradicate. That means, imagine if ideas were like people, ideas, subjects were like people, and then they were all living in the same space of attention, and then the ideas began fighting each other. Just like how, for example, the idea of, and let me tell you, the history of ideas is very violent, simply because we were more of an animal when we were younger. So in life, we are we are an animal. This animal doesn't have morality at first, so it's vicious. So that means the more we go back in history, the zero, excuse my language, but the zero fucks the creature gave about its environment and its continuity. That means, hilariously, we survived by not caring about our survival until consciousness developed into an individualism. Right? And so ideal warfare, when I say the war of the language wars, where languages are at war, sorry guys, this was on mute. I don't know how long it was on mute. Okay, not to lose the momentum of the episode, but what I'm trying to say is that the militant atheistic movement came to hit back how religion had hit first. And how religion had hit first was that it became the dictator idea of history for a long time. But it was necessary, in the sense that Voltaire, this very intellectual atheist, he says that even if there was no concept of God, there would be a necessity to create it. And he means it in the sense that whatever we do in this life, a creature will eventually, anytime a creature animates into a personality, it's going to think about the world, and it's going to be like, where did people come from? And it'll be like, oh yeah, the people came from people. But then it's going to think, where did the world come from? And it's going to think the world is either a person or the world came from our person, from who we are. So what it is that ideological occupation of human attention as human beings became more of a community. Inner realms were connecting to have an influence in the outer realm. The loudest inner realm wins. That has been history, the most powerful. And when I say loudest, that means like the Medici family in Venice. Venice? I don't know. The Medici family, these wealthy bankers, the way they went into power is realizing that there was a religious force, not in a spiritual sense, in a social, cultural sense, What that means is Galileo was put on house arrest, and many scholars, when you look at the evolution of science, it was literally like born in the house of religious truth. One was wondering about what else there is. That means it's as if we can totally understand the justification for the atheist's anger. But at the same time, the response, the strategy the atheistic, militant atheism is implementing is that it's trying to enforce an outer realm truth upon people's inner realms, and this is not possible. That's the thing, that it's not possible to enforce in the outer realms. That means I'm a person giving a talk. Regardless of how much people listen to my talks, you will understand the voice of how your mind functions is way louder than mine. And everything in life is design. Tell me one thing that we can communicate that doesn't have design. Everything has a shape. That means you bypass a lot of ignorance of the educational system when you're actually trying to look for a fundamental design. You see, this is what I would say is the difference between how my ideas are going all over the place right now, but but I would say the difference between how the general approached the battlefield, how the commanding officer approached the battlefield, and how the soldier approached the battlefield. The biological body is like an enlisted soldier in consciousness, okay? Consciousness, which is the function of our minds, active. Like right now, this episode is a function of my mind. It's not the forces of the outer realms shaping this episode only. It is also the animation from within. That means I'm like a being who suddenly noticed something, and it's like, if we were caveman back in the day, I'm just making caveman noises loudly. So, but what it is that the soldier's task, this task of the soldier is to be actually defense of the kingdom. That way, in some sense, the body has an honor. Why do you have a biological body? It is in some sense to defend the human force, the human intelligence, humanity's intelligence. It's a response to the defense. It's like we human beings are not just humans. We are the defense mechanism for an invisible witness to endlessly explore through information. Sometimes I feel, are we people, or are we just like a wind of intelligence that is endlessly consuming information, right? It's as if you can think of yourself as the main event of reality. You can think about you can think about others being the main event in reality, or the world. There has been times in life where I have felt as equal as dirt. What I mean by that is I was walking in nature and I realized everything is stuff. All our meaning, all our lives, all our explorations is in an existential objective realism. So we are objects that have noticed they can move themselves, and the way we're contemplating it now as a species is by saying the subject, you know? It's like, yeah, that person's a thought, and that other person is a thought, you know, and all those people in the future who are going to be born are thoughts, you know? This is a masking. This is the masking, because when you take off the mask of reality, direct experience is what animates things. Direct experience is not an object. So that means objects are found within, or let me say it like this, the classification between the experiencer and the experienced. What is being experienced is existence. What is doing the experiencing is it can't be existence. What it means is the quality, that's why we even created the word mind. If the mind was different, it was the same as the body, we would never need to create the concept. But because we notice that there is another line of invisible moving force behind our eyes, and that moving force, it is like, I don't want to say it is God, because that would be disrespectful to the concept of God, you know? But I would say it is, poetically I may say, but I would say what is going on here is that a collective being is remembering itself from its different individual access points to the world. So we are actually a giant collective being. Our minds, our bodies are separate, our bodies are animalistic. So it would be something where imagine, like, I remember seeing this video on online where it showed this like person who went by Canadian geese, and he just like told the geese to come over, and all the geese just came over to the person, you know, right? And so I feel what is going on with human behavior is that we're actually the same as other species, but our biological evolution gave us access to be an antenna to the life of a collective phenomenon. So when we think about minds living on Earth, ethics is very different. Ethics has to do with how you animate the moment. But if you live as a body, then there is in some sense no ethics. It's like, what kind of justice can an atom seek, you know? Can you imagine an electron wanting to go to heaven, you know? Minds have emerged, but we think these minds are from the biological body. They're not from the biological body only. The memory is. What that means is like we're like an accumulation machine. You know, eyes open, everything you experience, information, all of these, they are being contained, and believe it or not, information is also being the container. So if you hear a good idea and it ultimately updates your worldview, regardless of whether you think that idea came from you or from others, it has changed the background narrative to the meaning. So when I think about even the future of ethical systems, we're either gonna just juice, like, you know how somebody's like, you know, trying to prepare, you know, raw orange juice, right? So it would be like language is like the orange, and we're like completely pressing out the fluids in the system, you know? So what I'm saying is that we are pushing the momentum of the language is just going to be so overused that we're going to just naturally, instinctually be happy to remember ourselves multidimensionally. The mystery stands. That means people should have an attitude that what they see as truth is not only has the potential to be wrong, not only has the potential to be right, but beyond right and wrong, its nature transcends condition. Right now we're a conditional animal. Like, everybody needs a skin to have their organs and their body and their blood and everything to be there, right? So it's like a condition. So it's like your muscles and your body is conditional. Even all of this even is conditional to your heartbeat. That means if right now my heart wasn't just 24/7 beating, I wouldn't be even here, right? So it's as if the body is aiming for something. Evolution is kind of like the animal trying to, you know what it is? It's like the poem Rumi says, you were born with wings, why prefer to crawl through life? That crawling through life was the evolution of our attention. But now is the time where we remember we have wings, right? So I'm telling you, I may be one of the few people who can say this, but when you have a non-personal, that means when you have a relationship with your own mind which has nothing to do with the idea of a person, or any individual idea, then creativity is ultimate. And I wrote a book on this. It's called The Inventor's Sphere, which I was saying in the book that every person on the planet, like an antenna, can access this information highway, or maybe not called an information highway. It's like a planet of information, but not physical, of a physical nature. Anyways, there's more to say about Hume's Guillotine. People should know the distinction between what is and what ought to be, I want to read a passage for the audience. It says, also known as Hume's law, this is Hume's Guillotine. It says, or the is-ought problem. This is important for philosophers listening to know. This refers to the observation that many thinkers derive prescriptive moral statements about how things should be on the basis of descriptive statements, how things are in reality. That means things are a certain way, people look at how those things are being in a certain way, and then they extract what ought to be, what can be, what should be, and all these relationships with the future we develop, right? So what that means is the whole difference between, I would say, prescriptive and descriptive statements, and this was what I was trying to say at the beginning too, is that one is direct, experientially accessible as objective reality, so it becomes like, you know what it is? It's like the world is imagination you didn't have to imagine. It's like you're finding yourself inside the imagination of an unknown universe. And so people are believing in gods, people are believing they're nothing, some people are trying to own everything, some people own nothing, and so it becomes like the world we live in now. It is a game, it's theatrics, it's 24/7 ideological Halloween. And people have not understood that we have one lifetime to be our true presence, because it's easy to hide under language. I did that for a long period of my life, until 2011, something in life shook me and I woke up, So what that means is this world, people can, it's not that even people can sell. To the ancient yogis, they were like, the world can sell you illusion. So in the same way in monotheistic traditions, they perceived that there was, for example, the archetype of like this fallen angel, this force that is taking you towards the lesser or the inferior, you know. So in the yogic mind, which is a polytheistic tradition, in some sense it wasn't an individual, it wasn't like called the devil, it was samsara. Do you see? It's all qualities of the world which are interpreted to ourselves as a different space. So we are actually living in a physical world. That's the first world we're in. We are living in an interpretation of the physical world, do you know? Which is the second world we're living in. And the third world is where we're standing as an unknown witness, simultaneous witness of all angles of perception. That means it's as if, what is the degrees of the of a center of the circle? You know, it has no degrees. That is enlightenment. You know, this episode I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel of David Hume. For me, quotes are like missing pages from the elder scrolls of the human mind's effort so far. Alright, so quote tunnel. Let's enter it. So, this Scottish philosopher, born May 7th, 1711, and exited the realm at August 25th, 1776, he says, "Beauty in things exists in the mind which contemplates them." That means seldom is this said, nobody can make you feel beautiful. It's an inner thing. It happens from inside. That means it comes from, it expresses from within rather than being received from outside. David Hume says the sun will not rise tomorrow. That the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible a proposition and implies no more contradiction than the affirmation that it will rise. David Hume says reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions and can never pretend to any office other than to serve and obey them. Which, and you know what he means? He means logic is limited to sensory perception. As a sensory animal, the sensory perceptions are creating the edge of the world rather than us actually having an attention beyond the language threshold. David Hume says truth springs from argument amongst friends. So the best time to argue is with friends. The best people to argue with. David Hume says a wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. Yeah, because what else can you do? David Hume says, heaven and hell suppose two distinct species of men, the good and the bad, but the greatest part of mankind float betwixt vice and virtue. David Hume says the heights of popularity and patriotism are still the beaten road to power and tyranny. Yeah, because self-significance, it's literally like you're a balloon, and the more air you put into it, at some point the archetype just dismantles or explodes, you know? David Hume says the life of man is of no greater importance to the universe than that of an oyster. I think that he said this when he was having dinner, right? David Hume says it is seldom that liberty of any kind is lost all at once. That means even though in one dimension of life freedom may be dismissed, in other dimensions of life there is freedom, because this world is very vast. Now, of course, in the future I can see technology settling in human life where we're going to start having machine-like body parts, not in the sense that we want to, it's just trying to preserve the ambitions of the brain as long as possible until the potential of the lifetime expresses. That means every person on this planet is like a lion, And at some point in this world, you will roar. Your performance will happen. Your karma is the universe's play through you, if I can say. David Hume says the corruption of the best things gives rise to the worst. David Hume says a propensity to hope and joy is real riches, one to fear and sorrow real poverty. Yeah, because if back in the day they would use fear to control things, it is you can say, if you wanted life to only be efficient, sure, you could say fear was a street smart move to control through fear. But at the same time, fear damages the inner realms. So what that means is, if an alien species attacked us on this planet, our species, imagine in the Hollywood and fiction movies you see on TV or whatever, imagine a species attacks our planet, right, and everybody gets traumatized. The whole species gets traumatized. Okay, so it would be as if a person being violent and cruel to human progress, in some sense, is like an alien invasion. That means it's as equivalent to that. That means it doesn't matter if the person fights an alien, fights a wild lion in the forest, fights another human being, fights like a robot or whatever, all the different things that a human being can fight. I could totally see UFC in the future being that, where a human being has robotic gloves, and it's like boxing gloves or something, and has to fight a giant metal robot, and that becomes like the whole UFC thing, But the robot, I don't know, is programmed not to hurt, so always calculates the pressure points not to injure, but to fight still. I don't know. I mean, this is too in the future. The future is always weird. The strange is its novelty's entrance into the void. David Hume says, custom is the great guide to human life. David Hume says he is happy whom circumstances suit his temper, but he is more excellent who suits his temper to any circumstance. That means some people, they will stay in a certain state of mind until something outside of them changes, but some people, they adjust their inner realms to outside. These people then find a freedom to adjust to every moment and preserve, you can say in a hilarious way, psychological energy. So how you preserve how you try to efficiently express your intelligence on this planet, is by treating every moment as its own room and allowing novelty, allowing emptiness to be the starting point. So that means there's a person thinking that they are the same thing throughout the whole day, and then there's a person who every new moment in the space-time continuum is a new access of the self, of the reflection of the self in the world. In the chat section, first of all, good morning everyone and welcome. June Twain says, what do you think about the age of the Golden Dawn system? What do you mean age of the Golden Dawn? Oh, the Golden Dawn, as in, okay, so I would say, what I think about the next phase, so let's just even simplify it and say whatever phase our species is going to go through, the whole species, not just an individual, where we're becoming a global entity. A global entity means that the internet did not set us free. The internet collectivized us. So I would think that as we go in the future as a species, regardless of whatever ideology the person holds as a banner, as they march into the unknown, but I would say that what's going to happen in the next phase is that the species will make an important decision on whether we want to collectively experience the freedom of being a mind, a civilized, advanced, multidimensional mind, or if we want to still play animal games. That means it's the most important time in the world, because we have reached the awareness of the better, but we haven't made the choice yet. And the choice has to do with the archetype we live in, right? In this moment in the space-time continuum, I am like a person named Amin using the online alias Mr.Within giving a talk. But if I was to consider 1,000 years in the future or whenever, I know that the ever-presence is there. What I mean by that is that when you have a relationship with yourself that is not based on a self, you become space. So you discover the same way your body is real to you now as a form, your mind is real to you as space at its core. When you realize this, there's a playfulness that arises, you know? And then we understand the importance of giving our best effort in the theater of history. There's a scene from this show I gotta share, you know, I feel it relates to the topic at hand. This is one of my most favorite literary works in existence. That means I'm like so unbelievably a fan of this narrative. But there is so in this show, Japanese comic named called Shingeki no Kyojin, Attack on Titan. Though there was how would I tell you? It was there's a scene where there is this militia that is going towards its last stance. Like it's humanity. It's like a fantasy world where giants are invading humanity's last resistance, and there are some people who join this force to retaliate against the extinction of their human civilization, right? So in one of those people that enlists in this unique militia that is retaliating against the cruel circumstances of the universe these characters find themselves in, there is a character, very profound character. I think this is one of the most well-designed characters in fiction, right? And it's this girl named Historia. She goes by this name, I think Krista at first, right? So nobody knows her real name, and she doesn't even know who she is, you know? Then she realizes she is from the royal bloodline of that universe's story, right? And there is a scene where this girl is like, imagine she's like this, potential princess. And in this scene, before she even realizes that, the show is giving you insight into her character, into the psychology of her character. And so there's a scene where people in town are freaking out, you know, and the giants are attacking the walls, you know. And so there's a problem in society, something messed up that's happening, right? And sorry, I'm explaining a different scene. The scene I want to explain to you is a scene where this giant from the sky is falling down, right? And they have turned it into pieces. And this when they realize this girl is an actual queen, the whole unique militia realizes this. I'm really stretching the story, but what happens is that she pretty much is realized to be an important person. All the people in her team are like, stay in the sidelines, don't join. She goes and says to the commander that she has to be the one, because she's royalty. She has a collective identity, right? Being a king and a queen is not easy. Why? Because you need to have a collective self, and you have to keep that collective self as great as possible, so the whole kingdom's greatness goes somewhere, right? So there is that kind of thing. So what happens is she, the militia gives her a permission to, at a very, man, it's like this scene in the show where this giant thing's falling on the village, and she goes and attacks it and breaks it before it like hits the people. And the people of the town see this girl that lived for the civilization in that moment, right? And then she gets known for her deeds, for what she did, how the energy was influential during her lifetime. And so her name is Historia, and she makes history in the show. And it's our participation with the living world that truly activates our intelligence or remembrance of it. You know, because we will move beyond the language threshold, not the language threshold, we will move beyond the linguistic simulation. What that means is I would give it 30 years. In 30 years, we're going to perceive the most unique shift of human intelligence, where people care to wonder about what it is they are before it finishes. That means sometimes when I give these talks, people think I have the freedom to say everything. The world is dictating the possibility of what can be said. That means in any moment, any sound can be generated. Krista realizes she's Historia, you know. The objective human animal realizes it's a field of intelligence, and we are at such an unknown point that we have to be the pioneers of the nature's mind in relationship to the modern man, to the modern human being. That means we're all members of the species, and free will is just dressing itself up. Because if we were to say, why do you need free will? Free will is to make decisions. Why do we need to make decisions? Because decisions are in the environment. They create our environment. An incredible concept is existential sensitivity. These two words are so profound. Because nature is being its purpose. The body has no other purpose. The soldier is not there to create strategy. The soldier is in some sense just there to be its position. Do you know? The pawn understands the value of the kingdom. Do you know? Because we're all pawns when it comes to time. If your fellow man, your fellow human beings were seen to each be a multidimensional mystery, that means just like in mathematics we have the unknown x variable, similarly we have an incredibly unknown mind variable, and every person is just functioning throughout the day. So a better strategy than trying to find meaning in life is to meaninglessly engage it, to see, to experientially. I don't know how to say it, but it's like if the energy is doing something. You know, whether we animate it through the human framework or not, energy is it's like its being is what it's doing. Lorna in the chat section says in 30 years, question mark. Yeah, because what I meant there was that by the year 2050, around that time, certain notable people in society, futurists, notable futurists have suggested that a technological singularity will happen. So, a technological singularity is a point in human history where our technology updated itself beyond our control. So man becomes the inferior species to the ability of something and created. You know, it's like that. That Frankenstein's monster narrative. It's like when that doctor made Frankenstein, he probably was like, "Yo, what if this thing tries to kill me right now?" Like the doctor had to think about that. You know. Antennas cannot be judged when the signals coming and going change all the time. If we say a person is a thought, most people use that idea in the sense of like, okay, right now I'm looking at things like this, so this is my thought, and of the moment, this whole moment is a thought. We have that sort of attitude, but beyond thought means a state where man is giving the steering wheel to pure nature. That is the greatest spirituality. Spirituality divine, devoid of the compassionate presence of the natural universe. Is behind. Okay, so I'm back, folks. What can be said? Beyond ethics, we are advanced human beings that are no longer disturbing the flow. When human beings seek the path of efficient vision, excuse me, when they seek the path of efficient vision, they will notice that they are sacrificing the inefficiencies of their desire. You can say a desire is like a person desiring a glass of water and a person desiring world domination. It's as if they both have desire. But why is it that one desire is not a big deal, And so the reason is that the desire does not impinge on the space. More than we are here to live in the world, we are here to be in the world. That means every person has lived an energetic life that their personality can never fathom, but you are it. I have had my conversations with my inner desires. And what I mean by that is that I've lived through moments in this life where an idea has tried to possess me. And when I say an idea has tried to possess me, I mean it in the sense that the idea wanted to become an absolute. That means imagine animals fighting for survival in the jungle. Now imagine being born in this world and feeling everything is perfect, and then suddenly realizing cracks in that simulation and noticing the chaos that is hiding in the shadows, and we are telling ourselves stories of artificial light. It is savage right now. There is a cruelty of a person being cruel to another person, but then there is the cruelty of a species being cruel to its own future. That's the cruelty that makes suddenly all the philosophers in the realm to just get up from their chair. There's something important that's happening. The world is going through a revolution of wondering how much language is going to be a part of our lives. How will our relationships be with our internal constructs? Once we see there is no student, once we see there is no teacher, once we see that sight is moving as the world, your whole moment is the essence of your soul, not just the forms you see in it, That means on some level a person could be like, my philosophy is colorism, and people would be like, excuse me, sir, what did you say? Colorism? What is that? And the person would say, for me, nothing exists except color. And that means that there is no such thing as people, there is no such thing as the objects, that everything is just like a landscape of color. Do you know? That means that person was trying to identify with just the visual, right? And you could even close your eyes and say everything is sound, So it's the way the reality works is that we're such a multidimensional instrument. In our efforts to play our life right, we may suddenly find greater visions, That means, I will tell you, people should not have the vision that success is a singular thing. Success is like the retaliation of greater forces, and finally the universe grants participation. That's it, really. All that wisdom says is look in the mirror again. And notice how the mind sees the body, but the body cannot see the mind. The body doesn't have a mind. In some sense, by definition, they're inanimate. I mean, a pantheistic view can be entertained, which is the whole buzz of the hard problem of consciousness, but I will tell you, what are the options? Either there's nothing here in this world, either everything is one intelligence, so everything is everything, there's nothing you can do wrong here, you're already in the heaven of manifestation, right? Or the option is it's dualistic, the universe is like this chaos and order engine that endlessly just reaches, it's like a system that reaches its peak and then it just dismantles. So what that means is people don't have life cycles only, but universal sectors have life cycles as well, right? It's just the identification with the body. That means some people think in their past lives, for example, in you could say Eastern traditions, that they were a person in their past life, and I'll be like, how hilarious. In Buddhist thought, we entertain the notion that there is reincarnation, but wait a minute, if you reincarnate, let's say you only had 2 reincarnations, what that means is you lived one life, and then you died in that life, and you lived another life, and then in that other life, in the second life, you were like, what is my past life? And you see it's just one life, and then you go into that first life, and you're like, okay, what is my past life? And you see it is the rawness of the void. It is when the mind calms down and we find the allegiance of souls. You know what it's like? It's like how a kettle boils and the bubbles rise up to the top of the surface, and so it's as if ideas are in some sense fluctuating in society, but the behavior of human being and how it's being changed. I mean, right now it's hilarious. There's a syrup apocalypse happening. What that means is sugar is like invading the human species. Energy levels of human beings should be maxed out. That means we should just invest in all the technologies that focus on how to advance a single day of living than trying to create products for a lifetime. Sometimes I look at companies and I'm like, this is why in wisdom they would say, if you are blind in your popularity, you are in some sense, how can I tell you, it was an obstacle to enlightenment, fame. This is literally said in one of the yogic texts, And so this desire for fame has to do with the expansion of the individualism, identifying with more and more, and eventually when a person just expands in their attention, what happens is they try to be the god of their own universe. But they will suddenly realize that whatever universe the mind animates, there is no perfect solution. So compassion and efficient tolerance is the smartest thing you can do. Do you know? That means it was as if you can see people, the stories we tell ourselves becomes the eyes of history. Sometimes when I give these talks, I say to myself, I'm like, there's no way, I'm like the only person who has noticed we are in the center of ultimate emptiness with a potential to fathom towards the infinite. Like, this is so unique that I can tell you, a person can forget their suffering, when the challenges of the realm arise. When I say challenges, that means imagine a soccer team with 8 billion players. And this soccer team was facing not another soccer team, they were facing the unknown. So we're all wearing the same jersey as far as extinction is concerned. Now, how much we apply, how much we go to a multidimensional era where everything has an additional angles. There's always I mean, how can we divide energy, really? That's the challenge. Knowledge is, it is paint of a hungry creature. You know, it's paint that is kind of dripping from the claws of a hungry creature, you know. I don't know, maybe I should paint the imagery. One more quote I would like to share from David Hume. This is one of the most important quotes I would say to hear. He says, "Be a philosopher, but amid all your philosophy, be still a man." The human experience will find itself at the crossroads of an visible road and an invisible road. And the best strategy is to create a system so free that resistance becomes its ally. You know, in Aikido, there's this technique where like a person's running at you to attack you, and all you do is spin and use that person's own force against them, right? So that means you become kind of like a mirror, you know? Now, we have to use the forces of nature and the unknown variables that challenge our mind, and we have to use that force against the unknown. That means it's like that genius chess move of humanity where we use the unknown to define the unknown. And what that means is ultimate creative freedom in ideological truth. That means in the future when somebody with their ancestors were theists and atheists, they speak, you know, they would realize that human beings were just creatures getting by, you know, that there is an innocence to our existential design. We are born as the small part of the picture, not the big part of the picture, right? Okay, guys, I'm just going to open it up to Q&A. I pretty much shared the imagery I wanted for the episode. Ultimately, it's dualism in society. Language is a dualistic technology in my view, so all philosophies that relate to language, they have to abide by some sort of dualism. You understand the axis, you find the axis, the dualistic axis of every moment, and you can ride the waves of the karma of the moment, you know. That means what is more advanced than a mind that doesn't see freedom is a mind that sees freedom. What is more advanced than a mind that only sees freedom is a mind that simultaneously sees the absence of freedom and the presence of freedom. You know, it's as if they ask the person, do you believe in God? And the person's like, yeah, but it's like a light switch. My belief goes on and off. Constantly on and off, on and off, on and off. You know, the person had light switch faith, you know. Light switch faith in the, you know, divine light. We are so great. Like, honestly, I'm so happy the species exists rather than not existing. I mean, that's definitely a cool thing, just noticing you exist as a being, you know. You know, it's like they ask a philosopher, how are you doing, you know? And the philosopher's like, I am being. It's like the true question is not how am I doing, it's how am I being. Philosophers are like the best pivots in they have a pivotal freedom because they're not bound by sensory truth. When you're not bound by sensory truth, you can actually wonder about the future, because it's like saying that if we can't test it, it's not real, so nobody can test the future, right? So does that mean our future doesn't exist, right? So you see, it's like it's all about the tolerance we have for how behind our eyes the world is happening, and how in front of our eyes the world is happening. And I was like, what's the solution to this puzzle? And in ancient yogic wisdom, the solution was brilliant. The solution was, it's in an instant. If you cannot access freedom instantly, you're not free. You will never be free. It's an instant awareness. It's how the mind is open to the day. There's a story of Guru Padmasambhava, pretty much this enlightened Buddhic figure. I think he's known as the second Buddha. And all those lamas, kind-hearted lamas who are, they in some sense like have Rinpoche in their last name, they are supposedly the expression of the soul of Guru Padmasambhava, right? So I don't think people realized how complex Tibetan Buddhism is. It has one of the most complex metaphysical relationships, as if like if you were looking at history, invisible aliens landed there early, And so what I mean by this is not aliens, because the concept of an alien is ridiculous. When you realize if we were the advanced civilization going to another planet, we would be the aliens. So the concept of an alien doesn't exist. There's just entities that are different in design and elemental access through how consciousness emerges from them. So Guru Padmasambhava, there's the story, he just animates at the age of 8 from a giant lotus at the center of this pond, and he just straight away goes to enlighten the water spirits by the lake, right? And it's his karma is so next level that a king is passing by and the king adopts this 8-year-old child, like enlightening water spirits or something in the lore, right? In the I would say Tibetan context of the event. So what happens is Guru Padmasambhava gives an advice to this assistant he had, this old woman who says to him, I'm about to exit, I'm just animating it, but she says, I'm about to die, tell me what I should do. She's not even asking about enlightenment, And then Guru Padmasambhava, what he does is he goes on to explain what happens beyond, right? And his explanation is so next level. Well, right now I'm just trying to find it. It's even better. It's better than any story I can say right now. Guys, I'm just trying to find this angle there. Okay. So here it is. I don't know if this is follows the same story I said, where Guru Padmasambhava is giving this advice to his assistant, but what it is, I don't know, like from what event this passage arises, but this is Guru Padmasambhava actually from advice from the lotus form, a collection of Padmasambhava's advice to the Dakini, Yeshe, Sogyal, and other close disciples. It's from that book, evidently, right? So Guru Padmasambhava, this is the content that finds us. He says, although your mind lies beyond birth and death, this illusory body does die. So practice while remembering death. The Guru said human beings don't think of death. A man's life is like a pile of chaff or a feather on a mountain pass. The demon lord of death comes suddenly, like an avalanche or a storm. Disturbing emotions are like straw catching fire. Your lifespan decreases like the shadows of the setting sun. This life is crossed in a brief moment, but samsara is endless. What will you do in the next life? Also, the length of this life is not guaranteed. The time of death lies uncertain, and like a convict taken to the scaffold, you draw closer to death with each step. All beings are impermanent and die. Haven't you heard about the people who died in the past? Haven't you seen any of your relatives die? Don't you notice that we grow old, and still, rather than practicing the Dharma, you forget about past grief? Chased by temporary circumstances, tied by the rope of dualistic fixation, exhausted by the river of desire, caught in the web of samsaric existence, held captive by the tight shackles of karmic ripening. Even when the tidings of the Dharma reach you, you still cling to divisions and remain careless. Is it that death doesn't happen to people like you? I pity all sentient beings who think in this way. The Guru said, when you keep in mind the misery of dying, it becomes clear that all activities are causes for suffering. So give them up, cut all ties, even the smallest, and meditate in solitude on the remedy of emptiness. Nothing whatsoever will help you at the time of death, so practice the Dharma since it is your best companion. So, first of all, this was an incredible passage. What he's kind of saying is like, because you're temporarily here, he's saying something like similar to Sri Ramana Maharshi, where he says your own enlightenment is the greatest service you can render the world. So you have to, as a human being, find a way to be able to respond to your individual inner realm's destination, and at the same time, if the outer realms you're not able to function in it and desire grabs you, then you focus on your inner enlightenment. That means, some people on the planet, maybe they're here to do inner work than outer work, to evolve the mind of the species more, or the body of the species more, or the grand story of the soul of the future we tell ourselves. We have to be honorable when it comes to the truth of where our eyes are found to look at the world. So, in this podcast, in this episode, I hope that the listener has realized that an antenna has no identity because it can identify with the newest signal. We're not defined by our yesterday because right now we're experiencing today. We're not defined by our future until we consciously walk through it and towards it. Dream states only if you dream, and if the dream is not automated, maybe you can go towards advancing civilization in your dreams, in the actual dream state, like lucid dreaming or whatever. That is a possibility. Another possibility excuse me. Gotta find the charger. Alright. Another possibility is maybe preserving a relationship beyond emptiness, beyond the singular, beyond the dual, and we just have a relationship as if we are infinity in the unknown. And then I think that would be a very, very advanced behavior of a species. I can't even fathom how people would behave if they realized they would never die. That there's a momentum to life that is the superior pilot to the moment. It's as if this is life. It's a vertical raindrop falling, and the raindrop is like, why have the heavens forsaken me? Why am I falling into this realm where I'm a drop and I can evaporate, I can fall on the ground. I don't know where I'm falling. I don't know where I'm going in this life. And so this individual drop is living with this intensity of the individual psychology, but the moment the drop lands in a horizontal ocean, horizontally you were never flawed. And once you become aware of that metaphor, like the essence of this metaphor I'm telling you, when you realize that it's an oceanic intelligence, it is a collective thing, and collectivity means that how the karma of the moment happens is not alone. What it means is that you no longer walk alone in the void. It's like iced tea. Like a universe having been, hot tea at some point. Oh man, metaphors are like truly, it's a fractal universe, I'm telling you. The inner realms can not only teleport, they can not only bring location. I would say that we can enter our mind as a body, which means which would probably, I don't know how to say it. It would mean that before you die, a field of intelligence remembers your individuality forever, and this has nothing to do with the outer realms of society. It's just like immortality for what? Immortality for the body, immortality for the mind, immortality for that which is witnessing the whole show. Because what meaning can existence have? It's being its meaning. So language it was like existence first, then awareness, then consciousness second, then language third. And the fourth, I've perceived it's going to be geometry. Definitely something to do with a sort of geometrical revolution. Imagine in the future they pass this law that no rectangular, buildings can be made. And so every house and home becomes like a work of art. Architects suddenly find jobs, because the world is focusing on its like quality. It's like for a limited time you have access to a world. Oh man, sorry guys, when I wonder about the future, my attention drifts, but